Hello, everyone. It is my favorite day. It is Wednesday where we bring to you some amazing content. I'm Stephanie, co-founder of Airdoma, and today we're discussing something that's one of my favorite things. It's the mindset of why will I figure it out later? It's the problem of what buyers are going through. So we're going to discuss why that quietly cost international property buyers millions over time. It sounds extremely simple. You'll figure it out later, but later becomes expensive taxes. It comes problematic rentals. It comes problems when you need to sell. It becomes problems when it comes to residency or legal structure. Maybe you find out you didn't even own the property. What? You spent all this money and you don't own something? Look, the challenge is too much of expensive mistakes. So we don't want to figure it out later. We want to figure it out early. So I'm joined today by Hannah, my partner in crime always, who is in Dubai, and things are getting a little bit calmer, but still a little rough too. So.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. Yes, I'm still in Dubai. Things are better now, but it gets easier by the day, right?
Yeah.
And now this topic, it resonates with so many buyers because international property often starts with excitement, right? People see a beautiful place, a promising market, a lifestyle opportunity, and they move forward assuming they'll sort out the details later. But global property is not just a purchase, it's a system of rules. And we talk about this a lot with our clients. There's rules around ownership and rentals and taxation and financing and resale and residency, even citizenship in some cases. And the buyers who navigate those rules successfully are the ones who plan for them before they buy. So let's start with the psychology part of it, my favorite. Why do buyers fall into this mindset so often?
Because the purchase is so damn exciting and they have this sense of urgency around it. When you get so excited about the opportunity, right? You see the beautiful property, a brand new development, and a market that seems to be growing, they act like that they've got to jump in right now or they're going to miss something. They focus completely on an entry decision. They think about the price. It's cheaper now. That view is exquisite. I don't want to miss the view. There's only a handful of those, right? The lifestyle is going to be so amazing for me. They are looking at the amazing upside, right? They're postponing thinking about the life cycle of the ownership, right? They're not thinking about what happens if their plan changes. They're not thinking about rental rules evolving because things do evolve, right? They're not thinking about those market conditions shifting. They want to sell sooner than expected, potentially, right? By the time those questions are on the horizon, the buyer's leverage is often much lower. And a lot of those problems are getting in the way. And so that's why we have to calm that excitement and bring realism back into the equation. And that's what we do here best at Airdomo.
Yes, and that's when the phrase, "Oh, I wish I had known this earlier," shows up, which you've heard that quite a lot of times when you sit with our clients on calls after they've already done something they're not supposed to.
Yeah.
But let's talk about where the real costs show up. So, if the purchase itself isn't usually the problem, where do those real costs appear?
Well, it's typically in three different areas, okay? It's the exit, okay? Some markets are very easy to buy in, but very hard to sell in, okay? Especially for foreign owners. They want you, their arms are wide open. Hannah, come, be here, be part of us. But they don't want you to leave. Okay. So they want you to stay. They've opened you up. They want you to stay in there. So they make it harder for you to sell it. Okay. They might have restrictions on the years that you have to hold that particular asset. Okay. So then they have tax surprises as it relates to that. Sometimes you might discover capital gains taxes, rental income taxes, or withholding rules that you didn't anticipate, okay? Some of the times, we're talking about these different locations and we're saying, oh, there's no capital gains, there's no capital gains. And that could be the case as you're collecting that income. But when you go to sell it, there might be something different. And so we want to find all of those things up front so that you don't have any surprises later. And then of course, third, the regulatory constraints. What are you regulated on? What are your ownership rules? What are your residency requirements? And how is that going to limit how a property is going to get used? Okay. Certain countries say, come, our arms are open. We want you here and we want to give you residency, but it's not because we want you to stay away and collect rental income. We actually want you to come here and spend 6 months out of your year with us. So all of those things have to be considered when you're looking at what location is it that you want to purchase in.
Yes, that makes sense. And it's basically, it's not the cost always, that's the financial immediacy. It's the loss of flexibility that actually happens. And that makes sense. So let's talk about the strategic buyer approach. How do experienced buyers approach these decisions differently?
Well, they think about the ownership journey before they buy, the full ownership, okay? So ask the questions like, who will buy this property from me later? What is the resale market for foreign owners? What are the tax implications of selling? How flexible are rental rules? Could this property support residency or lifestyle changes later? Instead of focusing only on the purchase, you've got to focus on the future adaptability. And that mindset alone protects both your capital and your freedom. And those are my two favorite words, capital and freedom. Capital's money, freedom is what we all want, right?
Absolutely agree. It's essentially reverse engineering the decision from the future backward, right?
Absolutely.
That's an easier way to think about it. Let's talk about international property as a system and not just an asset. So one thing buyers sometimes underestimate is how many systems are around international property. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. When you buy abroad, you're entering a framework that is going to include local property taxes, tax regulations, rental regulations, residency programs, inheritance rules, currency exposure. Okay. Now, not all of these are going to apply everywhere. Okay. Each of these elements can affect how useful the property becomes over time. That's why the strategy matters. When buyers align their property with these systems up front, you can create options instead of obstacles. Options instead of obstacles. That's the goal. And that's where we help you create those options.
And that's the difference between reacting later and then planning intentionally beforehand,
Yeah.
which is
Nobody
very
wants the all, happening, right?
Exactly. Let's talk about some common figure it out later scenarios. So, can you give me some examples? And I know you can because you've had thousands of them, but of situations where buyers wish they had planned earlier.
Well, I mean, here's most often buyers believe because maybe they see a sign that says you will receive a 10% return on your investment. Look, nobody can promise you that, okay? Now, if you're buying a property that already has income generating, okay, it's a resale, it's already got reservations, things are already on the books, then that's easier to have happen. But when you go to a location and there's a ton of new construction and those agents are saying to you, oh, it's going to generate X amount of dollars in income, look, that's not always the case, okay? And you might later discover that it's not going to generate anything. Or better yet, maybe there's a limitation on how many rental units can even be in that development. Let's say there's 100 units, and let's say there's 20 that are going to be allowed for rental, and you just so happen to have bought 23, unit number 23, right? So it's those types of things that are all examples. There's so many different scenarios based on locations and different rules. Even here in the United States, it goes different from county to county, city to city, state to state on how investments work and how restrictions work, whether you have to have a license to rent, whether you have to have a hospitality permit, all those different things. So you want to have all of that investigated ahead of time, and you don't need to do it. That's what the professionals here are for. That's what we do.
Exactly. And I think flexibility is one of the biggest advantages international property can offer, only if it's structured properly, of course.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Well, and
yes.
here's another big one, Hannah, is that, residency issues. There are so many people, and I've said this on numerous webinars, that have put deposits, non-refundable, large deposits on property, not realizing they had to be approved to be a landowner in that country or on that island. And what if they didn't get approved? What if they didn't apply? What if, right? It's a non-refundable deposit. That developer builder doesn't care. They're not going to teach you how to follow the rules. They're going to they're going to take your money and hope you don't perform, because then they get to take it again from somebody else.
Yes, and we've also heard stories and seen stories where people put deposits down on something they don't even own later because, as a foreigner, they're just not allowed to own it. So they're basically
Correct.
just renting it forever.
Yes.
So there's that as well. But okay, let's talk about how smart planning preserves that optionality, right? So, what does good upfront planning actually look like?
Well, we've got to evaluate it through multiple lenses. And that's why you've got to have a third party that can be objectionable, right? You can't have all the emotional depending on it, right? You can't just be that person that says, do I like it? Okay. Can I rent it if needed? Will international buyers want it later? You can't just say all of those things. You also have to have something like us at Airdoma, we're assessing these things, right? We want to look at the jurisdiction supporting the foreign ownership clearly. We want to see, how does this property support residency options? We want to know that it aligns with your long-term plans. And when we answer those clearly before you purchase, we're going to avoid the need for damage control later. Because here's the deal: we're building a relationship with you for the long term. We want you coming back to us when it is time for that exit. And no, if we can't get you to exit on that property, then we didn't do our job in the very beginning when you entered it.
That's exactly right. And for our clients, that's where the property shifts from being a gamble to being an actual strategy, which is what everyone wants. Stephanie, thank you as always. What I personally take away from this conversation is that the most expensive mistakes in global property often come from that lack of planning or just lack of information, not the bad markets themselves. So, for everyone watching, if you are considering an international property purchase and want to ensure that that strategy is sound before committing, that's exactly where we can help. On airdemo.com, you can actually explore vetted global properties across a lot of countries, many of which also offer strong resale demand, rental potential, or even residency pathways. So if you'd like some guidance, you can also book call with us, where we help buyers evaluate those markets and properties through a very strategic lens. So, thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to helping you make smarter global property decisions. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.